In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, spring was coming at a leisurely pace. The last remnants of snow were melting on the roadsides, and the trees were beginning to turn tender green. Elliot Harlow was oblivious to these changes, staring intently at his computer monitor, where tables and graphs blended into a single blur. Lancaster Manufacturing's logistics department was buzzing like a beehive. The phones were ringing off the hook, and his co-workers were talking quietly, discussing recent changes in shipments. Elliot was 28. He'd been with the company for 4 years, gradually rising through the ranks from intern to senior logistics specialist. Tall, with dark blonde hair and a slightly tense posture, he was pedantic and orderly. His desk was impeccably organized, documents in neat stacks, pens in a special stand, a monitor at the perfect angle to his eyes. "Elliot, do you have a minute?" The voice of the department head brought him out of his reverie. "Meet our new international supply specialist, Fiona Meredith. She moved to us from Portland." Elliot looked up and saw a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and attentive brown eyes. She wore a dark blue suit that didn't hide her casual confidence. "Nice to meet you," Elliot said, standing up and extending his hand. "Welcome to the team." "Thank you," Fiona smiled, and her handshake was firm and businesslike. "I hope to get up to speed quickly." Elliot was assigned to mentor Fiona for the first few weeks. She proved to be a quick learner, grasping the peculiarities of the system literally on the fly. Unlike his methodical nature, Fiona preferred to work on several tasks at once, often making notes in a small notebook she always carried with her. "How do you remember everything?" Elliot asked her one day, watching her switch back and forth between documents and phone calls. "I don't," Fiona laughed. "That's why I write it down. It's chaos in my head, but I've learned to work with it." Their first informal interaction was a month after she joined the company. The department was staying late, finalizing a quarterly report. When the main work was done, someone suggested they celebrate at a nearby bar. Elliot usually avoided such events, preferring to go home to a book and a cup of tea, but that night he unexpectedly agreed. In the semi-dark bar of Johnny's, amid the hum of voices and clinking glasses, he and Fiona found themselves at the same table. She drank light beer and talked about her life in Portland, about the small apartment overlooking the river, and how she had decided to move to make a fresh start. "Why Lancaster?" Elliot asked. "My aunt lives here. Plus it was a good job opportunity," Fiona said, and then looked at him curiously. "Are you from around here?" "Born and raised here," Elliot nodded. "Went to Lancaster High School, then college in Philadelphia, and back again. Nothing much." "Sometimes that nothing much is the best part," Fiona said, and that phrase hurt Elliot for some reason. He was accustomed to thinking of his life as predictable and measured, and he'd never thought about whether it could be interesting. After that evening, something changed. They began to have dinner together more often, discussing more than just work matters. Elliot learned that Fiona liked nature documentaries, played the ukulele, and collected old vinyl records. She also discovered that beneath his reserved exterior was a man with a passion for architectural history and a knack for Italian cuisine. Their first real date took place 3 months after their acquaintance. Elliot invited Fiona to a jazz concert at the local cultural center. After the concert, they took a long walk through the city at night, talking about everything: music, books, childhood dreams, and adult disappointments. "You know," Fiona said when they stopped at her house, "I never thought I'd find such a conversation partner in Lancaster." "And I never thought I could talk so much," Elliot smiled, and then, plucking up his courage, kissed her. Their relationship developed smoothly and naturally. They complemented each other. Elliot's organization balanced Fiona's spontaneity, and her enthusiasm made him step out of his comfort zone. A year later, they moved in together, renting a small house on the outskirts of town with a tiny garden and an old apple tree on the porch. Elliot proposed without much ceremony. One evening, as they sat in the backyard watching the sunset, he simply pulled a small velvet box out of his pocket. "Fiona Meredith, will you be my wife?" he asked, opening the box to reveal a simple gold ring and a small sapphire. "Yes, Elliot Harlow, I will," she answered, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. The wedding was modest. They had invited only close friends and family. Elliot's brother, Liam, was best man, and Fiona's friend from Portland, Olivia, was maid of honor. After the ceremony, everyone went to an Italian restaurant where they celebrated the beginning of their life together over a long dinner of wine and laughter. One of the important conversations they had was shortly after the wedding. Sitting in the kitchen over morning coffee, Fiona brought up a topic they had previously discussed only in passing. "Elliot, I want us to be honest with each other about children," she said seriously. "I've never felt called to be a mother. It's not what I want out of life." Elliot looked at her carefully, then nodded. "I don't burn with the desire to become a father either. My work, our travels, our freedom, that's what's important to me." "Are you sure?" Fiona interjected. "It's a big decision, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "I'm absolutely sure," Elliot confirmed. "We can be a complete family, just the two of us." A few months after that conversation, Elliot made an appointment for a vasectomy. It was an informed decision that they discussed at length. Fiona suggested waiting another year or two, but he was firm. "I know what I want, and I don't see the point in putting it off," he said. "Besides, it will save you from having to take hormones." After the surgery, Fiona cared for him carefully, and their relationship seemed to be made even stronger by this shared decision and responsibility. The next 7 years passed in quiet harmony. Their careers at Lancaster Manufacturing were going from strength to strength. Elliot became head of logistics, and Fiona became head of international supply chain. They traveled twice a year, bought a bigger house in a nice neighborhood, and got a dog, a golden retriever named Benji. Their life was orderly, comfortable, and predictable, exactly what Elliot had always dreamed of. But in the 8th year of their marriage, something began to change. Liam, Elliot's younger brother, always the entrepreneurial type, came to their house for the weekend with a new idea. "Imagine," he said fervently as he paced the living room, "a logistics company specializing in eco-friendly solutions. Electric trucks, optimized routes, minimal waste. The future is in companies like that, Elliot." Elliot listened to his brother with a skeptical smile. Liam had always been a dreamer, unlike himself. "How much startup capital do you need?" he asked, expecting to hear an unrealistic amount. But Liam was prepared for that question. He spread out on the table a business plan, financial calculations, market research results. The numbers looked reasonable, the risks calculated. "I've got some savings," Liam continued. "We need another investor, and I thought of you. Not just money, but your expertise in logistics. We could be equal partners, build something of our own instead of working for someone else's uncle for the rest of our lives." Elliot shook his head. "I don't know, Liam. I have a stable job, good salary, prospects for growth. So what? You're just going to sit in an office until you retire?" Liam didn't give up. "You've always been cautious, but sometimes you have to take risks to move forward." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. His brother's words lingered in his head. Indeed, his life had become so predictable that the days blended into one endless stream of routine. Jogging with Benji in the morning, then coffee, work until evening, dinner with Fiona, a book before bed. Weekends, cleaning the house, meeting with friends, sometimes a movie. And so, day after day, year after year. The next morning he shared his thoughts with Fiona. "What do you want?" she asked, looking at him carefully. "I don't know," Elliot answered honestly. "The idea of creating something of my own sounds tempting, but the risk—" "There are always risks," Fiona said. "But if you and Liam have it all worked out, why not give it a try? We're financially stable. We have a safety cushion. After all, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to the corporate world." There was logic in her words, and Elliot felt a surge of gratitude. Fiona always had a knack for seeing perspective when he got hung up on details and possible problems. He spent the next 2 weeks analyzing Liam's business plan, meeting with potential clients and suppliers, and consulting with a lawyer and financial advisor. The more he immersed himself in the project, the more he became enamored with the idea. Green logistics was indeed a promising field, and his and Liam's skills complemented each other perfectly. Finally, Elliot made a decision. When he returned home in the evening, he found Fiona in the garden pruning the rose bushes. "I've decided to quit my job and become Liam's partner," he said, feeling a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Fiona put aside the garden shears and walked over to him. "I'm proud of you," she said, hugging him. "It's a brave step." "It won't be easy at first," Elliot warned. "A lot of work, less income." "We'll manage," Fiona said confidently. "I have a good salary, and you deserve a chance to try something new." That evening they opened a bottle of good wine and talked about the future for a long time, making plans and dreaming. Elliot felt as if he had lifted the heavy weight of years of routine off his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he was truly excited about the changes ahead. A month later, Elliot tendered his resignation at Lancaster Manufacturing. His bosses were surprised and offered a raise to retain a valued employee, but his decision was firm. On the last working day, colleagues threw a farewell party where even the most skeptical wished him luck in his new endeavor. Thus began a new phase in Elliot Harlow's life, one that would change not only his career trajectory but also his marriage to Fiona in ways he could never have foreseen. The first few months of entrepreneurship have been much more difficult for Elliot than he expected. The company he and Liam had named Greenway Logistics required far more time and effort than any corporate position. The brothers rented a small office on the outskirts of Lancaster, bought 2 electric trucks, hired 3 drivers and a dispatcher. Elliot was in charge of operations and customer relations. Liam handled marketing and finance. Their first customers were small farms supplying organic produce to restaurants and health food stores. Competition was fierce, and to stay afloat, the brothers worked almost non-stop. Elliot often arrived home after 10 o'clock at night, tired and silent, barely finding the energy to eat dinner and shower before going to bed. Fiona did her best to support her husband. She got up early to make him breakfast, left a lunch in the container for him to take with him, took an interest in company affairs. But as time went on, their communication became more and more superficial. "How was your day?" she'd ask when Elliot got home. "Normal," he answered, massaging his temples. "Lots of work, as usual. And you?" "Nothing much," Fiona shrugged, and that was often the end of the conversation. Elliot was too exhausted for long conversations, and Fiona gradually stopped sharing the details of her life, sensing that her husband didn't care. On weekends that they used to spend together, walking with Benji in the park, driving around the neighborhood, or just lazing around at home with books and movies, now Elliot often left for the office or meetings with potential clients. Fiona was increasingly alone in their spacious home, which now seemed strangely empty and quiet. Their intimate life had also changed. They used to have a fulfilling sex life, but now intimacy was rare and mechanical. Elliot was too tired to take the initiative, and Fiona gradually stopped trying to seduce him, tired of rejection. One evening, when Elliot was once again late, Fiona, sitting alone at dinner, suddenly realized that she couldn't remember the last time she and her husband had really talked or laughed together. Benji, their golden retriever, laid his head in her lap as if sensing her sadness. "What's happening to us, Benji?" she murmured, stroking the dog's soft fur. At her job at Lancaster Manufacturing, Fiona was becoming more and more immersed in her responsibilities. After Elliot left, the logistics department was headed by a new manager, Nathan Brody, transferred from the company's Baltimore branch. He was about 35, divorced, and had a reputation as a talented professional with an out-of-the-box approach to problem solving. At first, Fiona was wary of Nathan. His working methods were very different from the way she was used to Elliot's. Nathan loved brainstorming sessions, experimenting with new technologies, encouraging employees to take initiative. But gradually, she began to appreciate his fresh perspective and the energy he brought to the department. Nathan, in turn, quickly came to appreciate Fiona's professionalism and in-depth knowledge of international supply chain. He consulted with her often, listened to her opinions, and over time began to assign her more and more complex and interesting projects. Their first informal conversation was after a long meeting when everyone else had dispersed. They were discussing a problem with the customs clearance of goods from Southeast Asia, and Nathan offered to have coffee to continue the discussion. "I'm sorry to keep you," he said as they settled down in the company cafeteria with cups of coffee. "My husband is probably waiting." "I don't think so," Fiona grinned wryly. "He's starting his own business, so he's not home much." Nathan nodded understandingly. "A startup is an all-consuming thing. I know that's partly why my marriage broke up. My wife couldn't stand my busy schedule and the constant talk about work." "And how are you now?" Fiona asked, surprised at her own curiosity. "I'm fine," Nathan shrugged. "Sometimes it's lonely, of course, but the work saves me. Besides, I have a hobby. I play bass guitar in an amateur rock band." "Really?" Fiona smiled. "What kind of music?" "Classic rock, alternative, sometimes blues," Nathan answered. "Do you like music?" "Very much," Fiona nodded. "I even play the ukulele, but rarely lately." "Why?" Fiona thought for a moment. "I guess I'm not in the mood," she said honestly. After this conversation, something changed in their working relationship. They began to discuss more often not only professional issues, but also shared their thoughts about books, movies, and music. Nathan proved to be an interesting conversationalist with a good sense of humor and a broad outlook. Meanwhile, the relationship with Elliot was becoming more and more strained. On one of the rare evenings when he came home relatively early, they had dinner together, but the conversation was not going well. "How are things at the company?" Fiona asked. "We're growing," Elliot replied. "We've signed a contract with a chain of organic stores for delivery throughout the state. Liam thinks we can break even by the end of the year." "That's great," Fiona nodded. "I'm proud of you." Elliot smiled weakly. "Thank you. How's work going for you?" "We're starting a new project to optimize shipments from Vietnam," Fiona began. Nathan suggested an interesting scheme using— "Nathan?" Elliot interrupted her. "Is that the new department head?" "Yes, I told you about him," Fiona replied, feeling a little annoyed that her husband didn't remember even the basics of her life. "Sorry, I must have forgotten," Elliot muttered. "Too much information in my head lately." After dinner, he settled down with his laptop in the living room to work for a few more hours. Fiona looked at him, focused, immersed in her own thoughts, and felt the chasm growing between them. At work, she found herself lingering after hours more and more often, discussing current projects with Nathan. Sometimes those discussions turned into private conversations. One day, when it was getting dark, he suggested they walk to the parking lot together. "You know, there's a jazz bar not far from here," Nathan said as they approached the cars. "They're having live music tonight. Would you like to come in for an hour? Just to listen to some good music and drink something non-alcoholic." Fiona hesitated for a moment. She realized that this was no longer just a friendly chat with a colleague. But the thought of going back to an empty house with only Benji waiting for her was unbearable. "Okay," she said, "just not for long." The jazz bar was a cozy little place with dimmed lights and a small stage where a quartet of musicians played melodic jazz. He and Nathan sat down at a table in the corner, ordered non-alcoholic cocktails, and immersed themselves in the music. It was the first night in a long time that Fiona felt truly relaxed and alive. "Thanks for getting me out here," she said as they left the bar 2 hours later. "Thank you for the company," Nathan smiled. It had been a long time since I had spent an evening in such pleasant company. When Fiona returned home, she found that Elliot hadn't arrived yet. She texted him, "Where are you? Is everything all right?" The reply came half an hour later, lingering at the office. "Don't wait up. Go to bed." Fiona lay in their big bed alone, as she often did lately. She remembered the evening at the jazz bar, the warmth Nathan had exuded, his attentiveness and genuine interest in her words. She was ashamed to admit that it had been a long time since she had felt anything like that around her husband. From that evening on, their meetings with Nathan became regular. At first, it had been innocent lunches at a cafe near the office or short walks on their lunch break. Then, rare but memorable evenings at a jazz bar or local musicians' concerts. They talked about everything in the world, laughed, shared memories. Fiona knew she was treading into dangerous territory, but she couldn't stop. Next to Nathan, she felt welcome, interesting, alive. He listened to her in a way Elliot hadn't listened in a long time. Their fingers touched as he handed her a cup of coffee. They glanced across the table during meetings. Sometimes he put a hand on her shoulder for support. Elliot, immersed in his business, seemed oblivious to the changes in his wife's behavior. He came home late, left early, and in the rare moments when they were together, he mostly discussed company problems or simply remained silent, staring at his smartphone or laptop. One evening, when Fiona got home after work, she found Elliot already home, going through the mail in the kitchen. "Hi," she said in surprise. "You're early today." "Liam has a family thing, so I thought I'd take the day off too," Elliot replied without looking up. "You're late. You have a lot of work?" "Yeah, I got held up in a meeting," Fiona lied. In fact, she and Nathan had spent an hour in the cafe talking about the new project. Elliot nodded, still sorting through his mail. "Elliot," Fiona called softly, "look at me, please." He looked up and she saw tiredness and a kind of detachment in his eyes. "What's happening to us?" she asked. "We hardly see each other. We don't talk." "I know," Elliot sighed. "It's a difficult time. Business takes a lot of time and energy. But it's temporary, I promise. As soon as we're stable, it'll get easier." "When?" Fiona insisted. "A month from now? A year from now? 5 years from now?" "I don't know," Elliot answered honestly. "But I'm trying for both of us, for our future." "What about the present?" Fiona asked. "I feel alone, Elliot. I miss you." He came over to her and hugged her, but the embrace was formal, lacking the warmth of his previous embrace. "I'll try to be more attentive," he promised. "Why don't we set aside one night a week just for us? No work, no distractions." "That would be great." Fiona nodded, but deep down she didn't believe it would make a difference. They did try to spend the next Friday together. Elliot cooked dinner and they opened a bottle of wine, but they didn't talk much. There was too much unspoken between them, too used to their separate worlds over the past few months. After that evening, the attempts at intimacy became less and less frequent. Fiona and Elliot existed side by side, but not together, like two strangers who happened to be in the same house. Meanwhile, her friendship with Nathan grew deeper. He told her about his painful divorce, about how hard he'd taken the betrayal of his wife, who'd left him for his best friend. Fiona shared her fears about the future of her marriage to Elliot, how she tries to reach out to him but runs into a wall. One rainy evening, they stayed late at the office working on an urgent project. When the work was finished, Nathan offered Fiona a ride home since she had walked to work. "Thank you," she said as they pulled up in front of her house. The rain was getting heavier, so Nathan turned off the engine. "Let's wait until it stops a little," he said, looking at the water streaming down the windshield. They sat in silence, listening to the sound of the rain. Then Nathan turned to her. "Fiona, I have to tell you something." She looked at him, feeling her heart start to beat faster. "I know it's wrong, and the last thing I want to do is cause trouble in your family," he continued. "But I can't keep pretending that there's nothing going on between us. I like you, and I think it's mutual." Fiona was silent, not knowing what to say. Deep down, she knew he was right, that their friendship had long since grown into something more, though they had never crossed a certain line. "I'm not asking you to make a decision now," Nathan said, seeing her confusion. "I just wanted to be honest." Fiona nodded. "Thank you for being honest. Yeah, I need to think about it." She got out of the car and jogged quickly through the rain to the house. It was dark and quiet inside. Elliot apparently hadn't returned yet. Benji greeted her cheerfully at the door. Fiona turned on the light, went into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew she was on the verge of a decision that could change her entire life. For days after her conversation with Nathan in the car, Fiona had avoided being alone with him. She arrived at work at 9 sharp, left with the last bell, and spent her lunch hour at her desk, absorbed in her paperwork. Nathan respected her distance, limiting himself to strictly work-related matters, but she felt his gaze on her, constantly attentive, patient, understanding. At home, Fiona tried to mend her relationship with Elliot. She cooked his favorite dishes, took an interest in the company's affairs, and once even offered to come to the office of Greenway Logistics and see how everything worked. Elliot was grateful for her attention, but he still returned late, tired and absorbed in his own thoughts. His attempts to be more attentive seemed strained, as if he were performing a duty rather than following a sincere desire. On Friday evening, when Fiona was almost done with work, Nathan peeked into her office. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, and there was an uncertainty in his voice that he had never felt before. Fiona nodded, feeling her heart start to beat faster. Nathan closed the door and sat down across from her. "I wanted to apologize if I embarrassed you last week," he said. "It was wrong of me." "It's okay," Fiona replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "We're adults and we can work together no matter what." "Of course," Nathan nodded. "I just wanted you to know that I value our friendship and I don't want to lose it. If you prefer to leave it as it is, a purely professional relationship, I will understand and respect your decision." Fiona looked at him, sincere, open, with a slight sadness in his eyes, and suddenly realized that she didn't want to lose him. Over the past few months, Nathan had become an important part of her life, someone she could be herself with without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. "I value our friendship too," she said quietly, "and I don't want to lose it." The relief on his face was almost palpable. "Then maybe we could have dinner together," he suggested. "Just as friends. I hear there's a new Thai restaurant downtown." Fiona hesitated. She knew she was crossing some invisible line, but the desire to be with someone who could really see and hear her was stronger than the voice of reason. "All right," she agreed. "I'll just text Elliot that I'll be late." She pulled out her phone and texted her husband. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." The reply came almost instantly. "Okay, I'll be late too. See you at home." The Thai restaurant was a cozy little place with dimmed lights and exotic aromas. He and Nathan sat at a table in the corner, ordered spicy tom yum soup, fried rice with vegetables, and a bottle of white wine. The conversation flowed easily and casually, from work topics to discussions of movies, books, travel. Fiona realized that she hadn't felt so comfortable and relaxed in a long time. After dinner, Nathan suggested a walk. The evening was warm, the stars twinkled in the sky, and live music was playing in the park. They walked side by side, sometimes accidentally touching hands, and this fleeting touch sent a warm wave inside them. "You know, I haven't been this happy in a long time," Nathan said when they stopped at the fountain in the center of the park. "Thank you for this evening." Fiona looked at him, his face lit by the soft light of the lanterns, his sincere smile, his eyes reflecting the stars, and realized she was happy too. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about Elliot, about her obligations, about right and wrong. She just felt alive. Nathan leaned into her slowly, giving her the opportunity to pull away if she wanted him to. But Fiona didn't pull away. Their lips met in a careful, tender kiss that quickly became more passionate and demanding. When they finally pulled away from each other, Fiona felt a strange mixture of euphoria and guilt. "I'd better go home," she whispered. Nathan nodded. "I'll call you a cab." In the car, looking at the city lights outside the window, Fiona tried to make sense of what had happened. She had just kissed another man. She, Fiona Harlow, who had always condemned people who cheated on their partners, who believed fidelity was the foundation of a relationship. How could this have happened? She was met at home by a sleepy Benji. Elliot wasn't there yet. Fiona showered, feeling the hot water wash the scent of Nathan's perfume from her skin, but unable to wash away the memory of his kiss. She went to bed, but couldn't sleep, replaying the events of the evening in her head. When Elliot finally returned, it was past midnight. He slipped quietly into the bedroom, trying not to wake his wife, but Fiona only pretended to be asleep. She listened as he undressed, went to the bathroom, came back and lay down beside her, careful not to disturb her. In the darkness of the room, she could smell the cold night air and the faint scent of diesel from his clothes. The next day, Fiona woke up with a heavy sense of guilt. She made breakfast, trying to be extra attentive to Elliot, but he was in a hurry to meet with suppliers and barely had time for coffee. "Don't wait up late today," he said at the door. "We're in the middle of an important negotiation, and it might take a while." Fiona nodded, feeling strangely relieved that she wouldn't have to pretend like nothing had happened all day. She spent the rest of the weekend tidying up the house, walking Benji and trying not to think about Nathan. But his image stubbornly came back to her, along with memories of the kiss, the warmth of his hands, how easy it had been for her to be around him. Monday morning, crossing the threshold of the office, Fiona felt a nervous shiver. How to behave with Nathan after what had happened between them? Pretend it never happened? Have a serious conversation? Continue wherever it led? Nathan was waiting for her outside her office with a cup of coffee, just the way she liked it, with a little milk, no sugar. "Good morning," he said with a slight smile. "How was your weekend?" "Easy," Fiona replied, taking the coffee. "Thank you. Listen," Nathan began as they entered her office. "I realize the situation is complicated, and I don't want to pressure you or cause problems. I just want you to know that I'm here, whatever you decide." Fiona looked at him gratefully. "I need time to sort out my feelings." Nathan nodded. "Of course, I'll wait." Over the next weeks, they balanced on the fine line between their professional relationship and their growing mutual attraction. They were impeccably correct with each other at work, but sometimes stayed up late to spend time together. They went to the movies, to a jazz bar, just strolling around the evening city. Each time, Fiona told herself that this was the last time, that tomorrow she would put an end to these meetings, but each time she returned to Nathan like a moth to a flame. Their relationship gradually became more and more intimate. First it was a long goodbye hug, then kisses in the shade of the park's trees, then a casual touch under the table during dinner. In the back of her mind, Fiona knew she was heading toward something irreparable, but she couldn't stop. Rationalizing her own actions became her lifeline. "Elliot has alienated himself from me," she told herself. "He's always at work. He doesn't have time for us. Maybe our marriage is just exhausted. People change, feelings fade, it's natural. I deserve to be happy." These thoughts allowed her to look in the mirror in the morning and not feel like a terrible person. One evening, After a particularly stressful day at work, Nathan suggested we go to his house. "We'll just have dinner and watch a movie," he said. "Nothing more, unless you want to." Fiona knew that this invitation was the last line she had yet to cross. So far, their meetings had been in public places, which gave her the illusion of control over the situation. "Okay," she agreed after a pause. "I'll just text Elliot and tell him we're running late." Nathan's apartment was small but cozy, with minimalist design and a huge bookshelf on one wall. One wall was hung with vinyl records, and there was a bass guitar in the corner. He'd made dinner, simple but delicious, steak and vegetables and red wine. They sat on the couch, eating, talking, laughing. Then Nathan turned on one of his favorite movies, but they hardly looked at the screen, absorbed in each other. When he kissed her, Fiona no longer resisted the inner desire. His touch was gentle, exploring, as if he were trying to memorize every curve of her body. She gave herself to him completely, not thinking of the consequences, not thinking of Elliot, just enjoying the moment. Later, lying in his arms, Fiona felt strangely calm. There was none of the agonizing guilt she had expected. Instead, there was a sense of everything falling into place, as if she'd finally found what she'd been looking for a long time. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked quietly, playing with a strand of her hair. "About how messed up everything is," Fiona answered honestly, "and about how good it feels to be with you." He kissed her on the temple. "I feel good with you too, better than ever." Fiona got home late at night. Elliot was already asleep. She showered, trying to wash away the smell of another man's odor, and slipped quietly under the covers. In her sleep, Elliot turned to her and hugged her, and Fiona felt a lump come up to her throat. For the first time in a long time, she felt a prick of real guilt. But the next day, the feeling dulled, giving way to memories of the night with Nathan. She texted him, "Thanks for last night. It was wonderful." The reply came instantly. "For me too. Can't wait to see you again." Thus began their real romance. They met 2 or 3 times a week, usually at Nathan's house or at a motel outside of town. Fiona had learned to lie to Elliot skillfully, making up work meetings, meetings with co-workers, refresher courses. She was surprised at how easily the lies rolled off her tongue, how naturally she had learned to live a double life. Meanwhile, Elliot began to notice changes in his wife's behavior. She began to stay late at work more often, less interested in his affairs, more focused on her appearance. Sometimes he would catch her pensive, almost absent look, as if she were mentally somewhere far away. One evening, when Fiona once again wrote to say she'd be late, Elliot decided to surprise her and cook her dinner. He bought groceries for her favorite pasta, a bottle of good wine, and candles. As he cooked, he remembered how happy they had been in the early years of their marriage and thought that perhaps it was his fault for being too immersed in his work and not paying enough attention to their relationship. Fiona got home around 10 o'clock at night. When she saw the table set, candles, and Elliot in his apron, she froze in the doorway. "What is it?" she asked, more embarrassment than joy in her voice. "Surprise," Elliot smiled. "I thought it had been a while since we'd spent an evening together." Fiona smiled awkwardly. "That's very nice of you. Only I've already eaten with my colleagues after the meeting." Elliot's smile faded slightly. "That's okay. Maybe at least a glass of wine?" They sat at the table, drinking wine and talking, but Elliot felt a strange tension in their communication. Fiona was polite but distant, as if her thoughts were far away. "You've been working a lot lately," he said. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, just a lot of projects," Fiona answered quickly. "And how are you doing? How's business?" Elliot started to talk about the achievements of Greenway Logistics, about new clients and plans for expansion, but he could see that she wasn't particularly interested. She'd always been supportive of him before, happy to see him succeed, but now she just nodded politely, asking no questions. After dinner, Fiona said she was tired and wanted to go to bed early. Elliot was left alone in the kitchen, washing dishes and pondering what was happening to their marriage. The next day, looking through the bills, he discovered that Fiona had bought new lingerie from an expensive boutique, lacy, not at all like the practical sets she usually favored. It was strange, since their intimate life had been on the wane lately. As Elliot began to notice one oddity, he began to notice others. A new perfume with a scent he didn't recognize, a sudden interest in jazz that hadn't been there before, a new hairstyle, more revealing clothes. All these little things were adding up to a picture he didn't want to see. One evening, when Fiona was once again late, Elliot decided to call her, but the phone was disconnected. He felt a prick of anxiety and decided to stop by the office to make sure she was okay. There were only a few cars in the Lancaster manufacturing parking lot, and he didn't see Fiona's car among them. The building was quiet and empty, too, with only a security guard at the entrance. "I'm looking for my wife, Fiona Harlow," Elliot said. "She should be in a meeting." The guard checked the log. Mrs. Harlow left around 6 p.m. with Mr. Brody. There were no meetings today. Elliot felt a chill inside. She had lied to him. For the first time in their entire relationship, she had lied to him directly, not just by omitting something, but by creating an entire made-up story. He went home and sat in the dark for a long time, waiting for her return. When Fiona finally arrived, she looked surprised to see him sitting in the living room with no lights on. "Elliot, why are you in the dark?" He turned on the lamp and looked at her, slightly flushed, eyes glistening, smelling faintly of someone else's cologne. "Where have you been?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "I texted you in a meeting," Fiona replied, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. "I called you, but your phone was off," Elliot said. "I stopped by the office. The security guard said you left at 6 with Nathan Brody, and that there were no meetings today." Fiona went pale. "Elliot, I can explain." "What can you explain?" he asked quietly. "That you're lying to me? Who are you really spending time with?" "Nathan and I did discuss work matters," Fiona began, but her voice shook. "Just not in the office, but in a cafe." Elliot gave her a long look. 4 hours in a cafe, and your phone was off the whole time? "I forgot to charge it," Fiona said quickly. "And yes, we have a lot of work to do right now. We were discussing a new project." Elliot wanted to believe her. He desperately wanted to believe that there was a simple, innocent explanation for all this, that his suspicions were simply the result of fatigue and stress. "Okay," he said at last. "I believe you." But it was a lie. He didn't believe her, and she knew it. They slept in the same bed that night, but it was as if an invisible wall had grown between them. The next day, Elliot decided to check his phone bill. He saw numerous calls and texts to the same number, especially during the hours Fiona said she was at work. Opening his phone, he realized that the number belonged to Nathan Brody. His name had popped up in Fiona's contact list when they'd exchanged phone numbers at one of the company parties. There was little doubt now, but Elliot still didn't want to believe the worst. Perhaps they really did have a business relationship, just more intimate than usual. Perhaps she was afraid to tell him, knowing how busy he was with his business. The week passed in agonizing anticipation. Elliot watched Fiona, trying to find evidence for his suspicions or, conversely, to see if they were unfounded. Fiona seemed to sense his wariness and became more cautious. She stayed late less often, called him during the day, even cooked his favorite Friday night dinner. But the denouement came Monday morning. Elliot was checking his work email when he saw a new unsigned email with the subject line, "You should know." He opened it and saw the pictures. Fiona and a man he identified as Nathan Brody entering a motel on the outskirts of town, them walking out a few hours later, holding hands, them kissing outside Nathan's car in a deserted parking lot. Elliot stared at the pictures, feeling his insides grow cold. There was no longer any doubt. His wife had cheated on him with a co-worker, and he, consumed with his business, hadn't even noticed their marriage crumbling. He closed the laptop and sat motionless for a long time, staring at nothing and trying to comprehend what had happened. There was an emptiness inside, a strange numbness, as if all of this was happening to someone other than him. Elliot didn't go to the office that day. He canceled all his appointments, telling Liam he wasn't feeling well. In a way, it was true. He felt nauseous, his head was splitting, and there was a strange emptiness in his chest, as if someone had ripped out a part of his heart. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain. He sat in his office at home for a long time, rereading the anonymous letter with the pictures of Fiona and Nathan. Who could have sent them? Someone at Lancaster Manufacturing who had noticed their relationship? Or maybe Nathan's ex-girlfriend, determined to get revenge? It didn't matter. All that mattered were the photographs themselves, the irrefutable proof of Fiona's betrayal. The hours dragged agonizingly slow. Elliot smoked several cigarettes, even though he had quit smoking in college. He tried to decide what to do next. Part of him wanted to call Fiona immediately, to scream, to blame her, to vent all his pain and anger. The other part of him suggested just packing up and leaving without a word, leaving her in the dark like she'd left him all these months. But in the back of his mind, Elliot knew he wouldn't do either of those things. He'd never been a man for impulsive decisions or emotional scenes. Even now, as his world was crumbling, he remained true to his nature, reserved, rational, collected. By evening, he had made his decision. He would wait for Fiona to return and talk to her calmly. Give her a chance to explain herself, even though there could be no explanation. He needed to hear the truth from her lips, to see the admission of guilt in her eyes before he could close this chapter of his life. Fiona arrived home around 7 in the evening. Elliot could hear her saying hello to Benji, taking off her shoes in the hallway, walking to the kitchen. He took a deep breath and walked out of the study. "Hi," Fiona said when she saw him. "You're early today. How are things going at the company?" "We need to talk," Elliot replied, and something in his voice made her freeze. "Is something wrong?" she asked, fear flickering in her eyes. Elliot pulled out the printed photos and placed them on the kitchen table. "These came in the mail this morning," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you want to explain?" Fiona turned pale. She took the pictures with trembling hands and stared at them for a long time as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Then she slowly sank down in her chair, still holding the pictures. "Who sent these?" she finally asked. "It doesn't matter," Elliot answered. "What matters is what they show. Is it true, Fiona?" She looked up at him, and he saw in her eyes a mixture of fear, guilt, and a strange relief, as if she had been longing to be told. "Yes," she said quietly. It was true. Elliot expected those words to be like a stabbing blow, but strangely he felt almost nothing. It was as if something inside him had finally died. "How long ago?" he asked. "A few months," Fiona answered. "First we just talked, then we became friends, and then—" "I didn't plan it, Elliot. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Fiona," Elliot said, a tiredness in his voice. "People make choices. You made yours." "I know there are no excuses," Fiona began, and her eyes filled with tears. "But you've been so preoccupied with your business. We hardly saw each other, didn't talk. I felt so alone." "And instead of talking to me, you decided to change," Elliot finished for her. He wasn't yelling, not accusing, just stating a fact. "I tried to talk to you," Fiona countered, "many times. But you were always too busy, too tired, too wrapped up in your own problems." Elliot realized there was some truth in what she said. He had indeed been consumed with his business these past few months, paying little attention to their relationship. But that didn't justify betrayal. "Do you love him?" Elliot asked, surprised at his own calmness. Fiona lowered her eyes. I don't know. He makes me feel good. He sees me, listens to me, understands me. And you don't feel good with me? The bitterness in his voice was finally breaking through. No, Fiona answered quickly. No, Elliot, it's not that. It's just that we've drifted apart. We've become like two strangers living under the same roof. And instead of trying to fix it, you found someone else on the side, Elliot said. It's my fault, Fiona admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I made a terrible mistake, but maybe all is not lost. We could try, go to a family therapist. Elliot looked at her for a long moment. He thought back to their first meeting, their wedding, all the happy moments they'd shared. And then he looked at the pictures again, his wife in the arms of another man, and felt something inside him finally shatter. You know what the saddest part is? He said quietly. Trust is like a mirror. It can only be broken once. Then, even if you glue the pieces together, there will always be cracks in it. Elliot, please, Fiona whispered, reaching out to him. He took a step back. I can't be here anymore. I need time to think. Where are you going? She asked, fear in her voice. I don't know, Elliot answered honestly. I just need to be alone. He grabbed his jacket and car keys and walked out without looking back. Benji gave him a sad look, as if realizing that something serious was going on. Elliot drove without purpose, just to be on the move. He drove through town, then hit the highway and drove until he ran out of gas. When he stopped at a gas station, he suddenly realized that he barely remembered the road. All this time, his mind had been occupied with thoughts of Fiona, of her cheating, of their marriage. He dialed Liam's number. Can I crash at your place? He asked without preamble. Sure, his brother answered. What's up? I'll tell you when I see you. Liam's house was in the next town, half an hour away. When Elliot arrived, his brother met him with a concerned look on his face. You look terrible, Liam said, letting him in. What happened? Elliot told him everything about the pictures, about the conversation with Fiona, about his feelings. Liam listened silently without interrupting, then poured them both a whiskey. I'm sorry, brother, he said. What are you going to do? Elliot shook his head. I don't know. Part of me wants to give her a second chance. We've been together for so many years, but the other part realizes that I'll never be able to trust her completely again. You don't have to decide now, Liam said. Stay here as long as you need to. Think about it. Weigh everything. Elliot stayed with his brother for 3 days. Fiona called and texted him, but he didn't answer. He wasn't ready to talk, didn't know what to say. In the back of his mind, he had already made up his mind, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words out loud. On the 4th day, Elliot returned home when he knew Fiona was at work. He needed to gather some things and contemplate his next steps. Benji greeted him cheerfully at the door, and Elliot felt a prick of pain. He would miss the dog who had become a true friend to him. As he crossed the threshold of their bedroom, he suddenly felt a strange alienation. It no longer felt like home to him. Memories of Fiona hugging another man, kissing him, giving herself to him, haunted Elliot, making it unbearable to be inside those walls. He quickly gathered the essentials: clothes, papers, a laptop, a few books. Then he sat down at the desk in his office and began to write a letter. Words were hard to come by, but he felt he had to explain his decision, to put a point. Fiona, I've been thinking for a long time about what to say to you, about how to express the pain and disappointment I feel, but words seem so insignificant in the face of what has happened. I don't blame you for feeling alone. I was really too consumed with my business and didn't give our relationship the attention it deserved. That's my fault, and I accept it. But your choice to turn to someone else instead of fighting for our marriage destroyed something fundamental between us. Trust, once broken, cannot be completely rebuilt, and without trust, any relationship is doomed. I don't want to live in constant suspicion, checking your phone, wondering where you are and who you're with. I don't want you to feel like you're under constant surveillance and control. Neither one of us deserves that kind of life. So I've made the decision to leave. I've already spoken to my lawyer about the divorce. He'll be in touch with you in the next few days. I won't claim the house or most of our assets. I just want the freedom to start over. I wish you happiness, Fiona. I really do. I hope you find what you've been missing with me. Elliot. He reread the letter several times, then placed it on the kitchen table where Fiona would be sure to find it. Benji whimpered quietly, as if realizing that a goodbye was happening. I'm sorry, buddy, Elliot said, stroking the dog's head. I'll miss you. He took one last look around the house he'd recently considered his own, then picked up his bag and walked out, closing the door carefully behind him. Fiona came home earlier than usual. After her argument with Elliot, she couldn't concentrate on work, constantly checking her phone, hoping to see a message from him. Nathan sensed her anxiety and tried to talk to her, but she avoided him, confused and lost. When she saw the letter on the kitchen table, she immediately knew it was from Elliot. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the piece of paper. As she read it, she sank into a chair, feeling tears flow down her cheeks. It was so like Elliot, a calm, rational, fair goodbye. No accusations, no anger, just a statement of fact. Their marriage was broken and it was irreparable. Benji quietly approached her and laid his head in her lap, as if trying to comfort her. Fiona hugged the dog, pressing her face into his soft fur, and let the tears fall. She cried for her mistakes, for her broken marriage, for her lost trust. And maybe most of all, she cried for the fact that Elliot was right. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. The next few days passed like a blur. Fiona contacted Elliot's lawyer, discussed the terms of the divorce. She didn't argue, didn't make demands, just went along with everything Elliot suggested through his representative. It seemed the least she could do after her betrayal. At work, she tried to avoid Nathan, taking projects that didn't require direct contact with him. But finally, he caught her in the hallway. Fiona, what's going on? He asked. You've been avoiding me for a week. Elliot knows everything, she replied quietly. He's gone. We're getting a divorce. Nathan looked shocked, but Fiona saw a glimmer of another feeling in his eyes. Hope? I'm sorry, he said, but his voice didn't sound very convincing. How are you? Terrible, Fiona answered honestly. I've ruined the most important thing I had. But you've been estranged for a long time, Nathan said softly. You said yourself that you felt lonely in that marriage. That doesn't justify cheating, Fiona said. Nathan was silent for a moment, then took her hand. Look, maybe it's for the best. You're free now. We can be together openly, without lies and secrets. Fiona looked at him in surprise. Did he really think they would be together after all this? That they could build a relationship on the ruins of her marriage? Nathan, I don't think I'm ready for a new relationship, she said, gently releasing his hand. I understand you need time, he nodded. I'll wait. For the next 2 weeks, Fiona was plagued by constant morning sickness. At first, she'd put it down to the stress of the divorce, but when the inexplicable fatigue and sensitivity to odors set in, she began to suspect another cause. After buying a pregnancy test at the drugstore on the way home, Fiona couldn't bring herself to use it for a long time. The possibility seemed so unrealistic. She and Elliot had always been careful, and he'd had a vasectomy years ago. But when she finally took the test, the 2 stripes appeared almost instantly. Fiona stared at them, not believing her eyes. It was impossible unless... The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. She wasn't pregnant by Elliot, but by Nathan. Their affair, which had begun as a search for comfort and attention, had led to consequences she hadn't even considered. Fiona sank to the edge of the tub, feeling the room begin to spin. What should she do now? Tell Nathan? Stay silent? Terminate the pregnancy? Keep the baby and raise it alone? After much thought, she decided she had to talk to Nathan. It was his baby too, he had a right to know. Fiona called him and asked him to meet her in the park after work. Nathan arrived with a bouquet of flowers and a wide smile. When he saw the serious expression on her face, he frowned. "What's wrong?" "We need to talk," Fiona said, leading him to a bench under an old oak tree. When they sat down, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm pregnant, Nathan." His face changed several times in a second. Surprise, shock, disbelief, and then joy. "Are you sure?" he asked. Fiona nodded. "Took a test, and it can't be from Elliot. He had a vasectomy." It's amazing," Nathan said, a strange fire in his eyes. "You and me and our baby. We're going to be a real family." Fiona stared at him, feeling a growing unease. His reaction was too enthusiastic, too hasty. "Nathan, I don't think it's that simple," she said cautiously. "I just got divorced. I'm in a complete emotional mess. And our relationship, it didn't start out in the most honest way." "But that's all changed now," he insisted. "You're free. We love each other. We're having a baby. Isn't that a sign that we should be together?" And it was at that moment, looking at his enthusiastic face, listening to his plans for their future together, that Fiona suddenly realized the terrible truth. She didn't love Nathan. What she felt for him was not love, but a mixture of physical attraction, gratitude for his attention, and a desire to escape the problems in her marriage. "Nathan," she interrupted him, "I'm not sure I love you." He stopped halfway, looking at her with a puzzled expression. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've had sex, spent time together," Fiona said, tears welling up in her throat. "But it wasn't love, at least not on my part." Nathan looked as if she'd hit him. "You can't say that. Not after everything that's happened between us." "I know it sounds cruel," Fiona said, "and I'm guilty in front of you. I used our relationship as a way of running away from the problems in our marriage. It wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry." "And the baby?" Nathan asked after a long pause. "What are you going to do with the baby?" "I want to keep it," Fiona answered. "I will raise it myself." "Fiona, it's my child too," Nathan said firmly. "I want to be part of its upbringing." "I won't stop you from doing that," Fiona nodded. "You can see the child, be a part of his life. But I don't think we should be together just because of the pregnancy." Nathan was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I need time to think about it." "Of course you do," Fiona said. "So do I." They parted that evening, both shaken and confused. Fiona went home and sat in silence for a long time, stroking Benji and thinking about her life, which had changed so rapidly in recent weeks. She needed to talk to Elliot, not to win him back. She knew that was impossible after everything that had happened. But to tell him about the pregnancy, to ask for forgiveness, to explain that she had finally realized what a terrible mistake she had made. She texted him, "Elliot, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back." There was no response. The next day she tried again. "I'm pregnant. The baby is with Nathan. I realize it doesn't change anything between us, but I think you should know." Silence. No response. Fiona tried several more times over the course of a week, but Elliot ignored all her messages and calls. She finally wrote a long letter apologizing for her betrayal, explaining the pregnancy situation, and saying she finally realized how much she loved him and how foolish she'd been to risk their relationship for a fling. She sent an email to his work email account but never heard back. Elliot seemed to disappear from her life, leaving behind only memories and a deep sense of guilt and regret. Pregnancy had not been easy for Fiona. The usual physical discomforts, morning sickness, back pain, swelling, were added to the emotional burden. She felt the judgmental glances of her co-workers, who had noticed her growing belly shortly after the news of her divorce from Elliot. Nathan kept his distance at work, trying not to give cause for gossip. He offered Fiona financial help, which she accepted after much hesitation. Despite his resentment, he kept his promise to be involved in the life of the unborn child, accompanying her to doctor's appointments and helping her prepare for the baby. At the end of the second trimester, Fiona left Lancaster Manufacturing. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly tense, and she felt she needed a change. Besides, working in logistics constantly reminded her of Elliot, of their first meeting, of their happy years together. Finding a new job was difficult. No one wanted to hire a pregnant woman who was about to go on maternity leave. The solution came unexpectedly. A friend offered her a temporary job in a company for organizing corporate events. The pay was less, but with alimony from Nathan and savings, she could keep afloat. Labor started 2 weeks ahead of schedule. For 17 hours, Fiona struggled with pain, fear, and exhaustion. Nathan was there to hold her hand, but she had never felt so alone. At 3 in the morning, a boy with a mop of dark hair and a serious look came into the world. "Hello, Callum," she whispered, gently touching the tiny hand. "I'm your mom." The first weeks after the birth had been the hardest of Fiona's life. Sleep deprivation, worrying about Callum's health, physical recovery, trying to breastfeed, all of it exhausted her. Nathan helped as much as he could, but she took the brunt of it. When Callum was 6 months old, Fiona returned to work part-time and began a part-time master's degree in business administration. Her days became a marathon. Baby, work, study, household chores. Help came from an unexpected direction. A neighbor, an elderly woman named Eleanor, offered to look after Callum while Fiona was in class. It was a real lifesaver. By Callum's first birthday, life began to settle down. Fiona was doing well in her studies. She had been promoted to project manager in the company, and Callum was growing up to be a healthy and happy child. Nathan visited his son regularly, took him away at weekends, and paid child support. One day, while putting Callum to bed, Fiona noticed how much he looked like Elliot, the same pensive look, the same wrinkles that appeared on his forehead when he was concentrating. Although biologically impossible, the thought made her smile bitterly. She still missed Elliot, his calmness, his dependability, the way he knew how to create a sense of security with his mere presence. By Callum's 2 years, Fiona had earned a master's degree and a full-time position as creative director at the company where she'd started as a temp. Her ideas for incorporating green practices into event management brought the company several prestigious clients and garnered local media attention. 3 years after Callum's birth, Fiona was standing in the playground watching her son climb the stairs to the slide. The dark-haired boy, with a focused expression on his face, climbed each step with a determination that reminded her of herself in recent years. "Mama, look!" Callum shouted as he reached the top. "I did it!" "Well done, son," Fiona smiled. "I'm proud of you." She was indeed proud, of him and of herself. These 3 years had changed her. She had become stronger, wiser, had learned to rely on herself and to find joy in small victories. Financial hardships were a thing of the past. Her career was on the upswing. She was even able to pay off some of her student loans early. Her relationship with Nathan had matured to the point of respectful cooperation for the sake of her son. He had met a new woman and seemed happy. Fiona was happy for him. She hadn't heard anything about Elliot in all these years. Occasionally, she'd come across news about Greenway Logistics, a company that was thriving, had opened branches in several cities, and had won an award for innovation in green delivery. Fiona hoped Elliot had found his happiness too. As she packed Callum to return home, Fiona reflected on her journey. She had made mistakes, hurt the man she loved, but had managed to learn from the experience. She didn't try to run away from her guilt or pass the blame onto others. Instead, she recognized her mistakes and worked every day to become a better person, for herself and for her son. Holding Callum's hand on the way home, Fiona felt a quiet confidence. Life doesn't always work out the way we plan. Sometimes our own decisions ruin the things we value most. But even after the most painful falls, it's possible to get up and move on, with wisdom gained through pain and hope for a better future.
Insomma.